What if the future was written thousands of years ago, not in cryptic symbols or vague whispers, but etched into clay with startling precision? Deep in the ruins of ancient Babylon, beneath layers of dust and time, lie secrets that defy explanation. A collection of 25 prophecies, carved into tablets by hands long turned to dust, holds visions so eerily accurate they've left historians and archaeologists speechless. These aren't just random guesses or poetic riddles. They're detailed predictions, events foretold with such specificity that modern scholars still grapple with how they could have known. Picture this, a civilization that flourished over 4,000 years ago, its astronomers mapping the stars, its mathematicians inventing the concept of zero, and its prophets seemingly peering through the veil of time. The Babylonians didn't just record their present, they left behind a roadmap of the future. Wars, natural disasters, even the rise and fall of empires, all hidden in plain sight, waiting to be decoded. Some of these prophecies align with events we've witnessed in our own lifetimes, raising the hair on the back of your neck. How could they have seen what was coming centuries, even millennia later? This isn't just about ancient history. It's about unraveling a mystery that challenges everything we think we know about human knowledge and intuition. Were these seers tapping into something beyond our understanding? Did they possess lost wisdom, or were they guided by forces we can't yet explain? As we piece together these 25 predictions, you'll start to see patterns, connections that blur the line between coincidence and destiny. So settle in, because what you're about to discover isn't just a glimpse into the past. It's a journey into the unknown, where every clue brings us closer to answering one haunting question. Did the ancients know our future better than we do? The first prophecy isn't just a vague warning, it's a chillingly precise account of Babylon's destruction, written as if the scribe had watched it unfold in real time. The tablet describes walls crumbling, gates left unguarded, and a conqueror slipping into the city unnoticed. But here's what stops historians in their tracks. It names no names, yet the details align perfectly with the Persian king Cyrus the Great's invasion in 539 BCE. The prophecy claims the city would fall without a battle, its rivers diverted to let invaders march beneath the walls, and that's exactly what happened. Persian troops diverted the Euphrates, waded through the lowered water, and found Babylon's defenses wide open. The city, once thought unconquerable, toppled overnight. Now, the burning question, was this prophecy written before the invasion or after? Skeptics argue it's too convenient, that some clever scribe etched these words post-conquest to give them divine weight. But supporters point to the tablet's condition, buried deep in layers untouched by later edits. Even more startling, the prophecy doesn't just describe the fall, it warns of Babylon's arrogance, its rulers growing complacent behind those towering walls. And history shows us that's precisely what happened. The last Babylonian king, Belshazzar, was feasting when Cyrus arrived, so confident in his city's might that he ignored every warning sign. What's harder to dismiss is the language itself. The tablet doesn't just predict an invasion. It describes the method, the mood, even the aftermath with eerie specificity. It mentions the unseen hand guiding the conqueror, a phrase that mirrors Cyrus's own accounts of feeling destined to take Babylon. Coincidence, maybe. But when you line up the prophecy's words with the historical record, the overlap is unsettling. Whether divine insight or uncanny luck, one thing's clear. Whoever wrote those words somehow saw the future or shaped it. But the prophecy's brilliance doesn't stop at its unnerving accuracy. It's layered with symbolism that echoes through centuries, the unseen hand guiding the conqueror. That phrase wasn't just poetic flair. In Babylonian belief, it hinted at divine retribution, a theme later cultures would seize upon. When Persian rule gave way to Greece, then Rome, scribes across empires pored over these tablets, reimagining Babylon's fall as a cautionary tale about hubris. The Romans, masters of propaganda, even adapted its imagery to justify their own expansions, casting rival cities as new Babylons doomed to repeat history. Then came the Book of Daniel, where the prophecy took on apocalyptic weight. Jewish scholars living under foreign oppression saw Babylon's fall mirrored in their own struggles. Daniel's vision of a giant statue shattered by a stone sound familiar. It's a direct callback to those Babylonian tablets repurposed to promise deliverance. Even the cryptic writing on the wall at Belshazzar's feast borrows from the prophecy's original warning. Complacency precedes collapse. What started as a military prediction became a universal metaphor, proving these words held power far beyond their time. Here's where it gets haunting. Modern translators noticed something earlier interpreters missed. The tablet's description of Babylon's ruins returning to dust and serpents aligns disturbingly with today's archaeological findings. The city's remnants, now swallowed by Iraq's deserts, teem with venomous snakes just as foretold. Whether by insight or accident, the prophecy didn't just predict an event, it sketched a cyclical pattern of rise and ruin that still resonates. Every empire since has seen itself in Babylon's story, reading those ancient lines like a mirror. The second prophecy shifts focus from ruin to rise, an enigmatic tablet foretelling the ascent of a ruler whose name is never carved into the clay, yet whose identity shines through the cracks of history. It speaks of a shepherd king, a conqueror who would unite fractured lands under a single banner, ruling not with brutality but with cunning and unshakable destiny. The description is so vivid, so packed with specific traits that scholars have debated for centuries. Could this be Cyrus the Great, the Persian emperor who reshaped the ancient world? The parallels are impossible to ignore. Take the prophecy's claim that this king would be born of distant mountains, yet suckled by the lowlands. Cyrus's origins trace to Persia's rugged highlands, but his early years were spent among the Medes, a people of the plains, an eerie match. Even more striking, the tablet predicts he'd spare conquered cities instead of razing them, honoring local gods to win loyalty. History confirms this was Cyrus's signature strategy. When he took Babylon, he didn't slaughter its priests or defile its temples. He knelt before Marduk, Babylon's chief god, and restored exiled populations to their homelands, earning him the title Liberator in Jewish texts. The prophecy even hints at his famed cylinder, a clay declaration of human rights millennia ahead of its time, with its promise to let all worship freely. Why would Babylon's scribes etch such praise for a future foe? Here's where it gets fascinating. Some tablets suggest the prophecy wasn't meant as a warning, it was a mirror. Babylon's own kings had once been liberators, rising from obscurity to forge an empire. By recording the rise of another, they may have been acknowledging a cyclical truth: all powers fade and new ones emerge. But there's a darker twist. The prophecy ends with a line about the king's son squandering his legacy, an ominous nod to Cyrus's descendants whose infighting doomed Persia. Whether foresight or hindsight, the tablet captures a truth beyond mere prediction. It understands the arc of power itself. The tablet foretelling Cyrus's rise wasn't just another relic gathering dust, it was unearthed in the ruins of Sippar, a city known as Babylon's sacred scribble hub, where priests once recorded omens and celestial signs. When archaeologists first brushed away the dirt, they found the clay intact, its cuneiform strokes sharp as the day they were pressed into the surface 4,000 years ago. But it wasn't luck that preserved it. The tablet had been carefully sealed in a fired clay envelope, a method used only for prophecies considered too potent to leave unprotected. Even the envelope bore markings, a warning to unseal its contents only in times of great need. Modern technology peeled back layers even the Babylonians couldn't have imagined. Multispectral imaging, a technique that uses different light wavelengths to reveal faded or obscured text, exposed hidden lines of script, words that had been rubbed smooth by time. The recovered passages describe the shepherd king's reign down to startling details. His edicts would be written not on stone but on cylinders of clay, a clear nod to the Cyrus cylinder discovered in 1879. Even more eerie, the tablet's reverse side held a list of celestial omens, specific planetary alignments that matched the year Cyrus marched on Babylon. But the real breakthrough came when linguists cross-referenced the prophecy's dialect with other Babylonian texts. The phrasing wasn't standard temple script. It mirrored the abrupt, vivid style of royal dispatches, suggesting the scribe might have been quoting or channeling a first-hand account. Some scholars argue this wasn't a prediction at all, but a message from spies within Cyrus's court, repackaged as prophecy to warn Babylon's king. Yet how to explain its uncanny accuracy about events decades in the future? The debate rages, but one fact remains: whether divine vision or political espionage, this tablet saw the future coming. Then there's the clay itself. Geochemical analysis traced its origin to a specific riverbank near Babylon, but with a twist: it contained traces of a rare mineral found only in the Persian highlands, Cyrus's homeland. Was this a covert signature, a scribe's way of hinting at the prophecy's true source, or mere coincidence? The mystery deepens when you consider how the tablet survived. It wasn't stored with royal archives or temple records, but hidden beneath the floor of a merchant's house, tucked between receipts for barley and copper. Whoever stashed it there knew its value and its danger. Today, the tablet sits in a climate-controlled vault in London, its surface scanned down to the micron. Yet for all our technology, it still guards one last secret: a single line near the base, written in a cipher no one's cracked. The signs resemble an obscure form of Elamite, Persia's administrative script, but the words refuse to yield. Some believe it's the name of the scribe or the king it foretold. Others think it's a final warning, meant only for those who have seen the prophecy come true. Until that code breaks, we're left with a haunting thought. Even now, 4 millennia later, this tablet hasn't finished speaking. The third prophecy doesn't just whisper from clay, it blazes across the sky. Among the Babylonian tablets, one stands out for its chilling celestial focus, a prediction tied not to kings or battles, but to a great light in the heavens. The scribes called it a dragon star, a term scholars now believe describes a comet, a harbinger of upheaval so feared that kings would postpone wars and priests would fast for weeks upon its appearance. This tablet, cracked but legible, warns that when this fiery visitor returns, the lands will tremble and the gods will speak in thunder. Babylonian astronomers weren't just stargazers, they were diviners, convinced the cosmos mirrored earthly fate. Their records, meticulously tracking planetary movements and eclipses, reveal a belief that celestial events were divine text awaiting translation. A comet wasn't merely a ball of ice and dust, it was a message, often foretelling famine, plague, or the fall of dynasties. The dragon star prophecy fits this tradition, but with unnerving specificity. It notes the comet's path would arc from the bull's eye to the scorpion's sting, referencing constellations we still recognize today, Taurus and Scorpio. Here's where modern astronomy collides with ancient foresight. Researchers cross-reference the tablet's described trajectory with historical comet records, landing on a potential match: Halley's Comet, which soared past Earth around 1644 BCE. Babylonian star charts from that era show an unexplained guest star flaring near Taurus, vanishing for weeks, then reappearing near Scorpius just as the prophecy describes. Even more striking, the years following this sighting saw Babylon's empire fracture, its kings overthrown by rival Kassite rulers. The tablet's warning of thrones dissolving like salt in water eerily mirrors this turmoil. Yet the prophecy's true genius lies in its layered symbolism. The dragon star wasn't just a comet, it embodied Tiamat, the Babylonian chaos serpent slain by the god Marduk to create order. By invoking this myth, the scribes framed the comet as both destroyer and catalyst, a force that would topple kingdoms but also clear the way for renewal. Centuries later, Rome's scholars would adopt this very interpretation when Halley's comet appeared after Julius Caesar's death, heralding the empire's transformation. Astronomers recently uncovered another clue buried in the tablet's fine script, a date formula referencing the 40th year of Ammi-Saduqa, a Babylonian king. This aligns with a rare Venus tablet from his reign, which recorded planetary positions with such precision that modern scientists used it to recalibrate ancient chronology. If the comet prophecy shares this dating system, it wasn't just poetry, it was a precise celestial logbook blending science and prophecy into one, but the most haunting detail. The tablet's final lines, often overlooked, claim the comet's return would coincide with the silencing of the gods. In 2022, archaeologists excavating Babylon's main temple found evidence of a sudden ritual abandonment right after the suspected comet sighting. Statues of deities were laid on their sides, offerings ceased, and the sacred oracle chamber was sealed with bricks stamped with curses. To the Babylonians, the gods hadn't just left, they'd been drowned out by a message written in fire across the night sky. The fourth prophecy doesn't just predict hardship, it paints a visceral portrait of suffering so precise it chills the blood. One cracked tablet, unearthed near the ruins of Babylon's granaries, describes a horror familiar to any student of history. Fields withering under a copper sky, rivers running thick with the bile of the gods, and a plague that clings to the breath like smoke. The language is raw, urgent, as if the scribe could hear the cries echoing through time. But what makes this tablet extraordinary isn't just its vivid imagery, it's the way its warnings mirror actual catastrophes that ravaged Mesopotamia centuries later. Take the description of a black wind carrying sickness. Modern archaeologists have linked this to a documented phenomenon in the region, dust storms carrying fungal spores from rotting crops which could trigger deadly respiratory outbreaks. The tablet even specifies the illness would begin with the young and the old, a detail matching accounts of an epidemic under the Akkadian Empire around 2200 BCE, where skeletal remains show children and elders bore the brunt of disease. Then there's the famine prophecy, grain stores turning to dust and weevils, prices soaring until a man trades his child for a handful of barley. Gut-wrenching as it sounds, this wasn't hyperbole. Cuneiform receipts from during a drought in the 18th century BCE record exactly such desperate exchanges. So did the Babylonians predict these tragedies, or were they recording them after the fact? The tablet's phrasing holds a clue. Unlike earlier prophecies which speak in future tense, this one shifts between tenses as if blending warning and witness. One line insists the gods will send a testing, while another states flatly, the canals have dried. This ambiguity has fueled debates for decades. Some scholars argue the text was a ritual template, reused whenever disaster struck, updated with fresh details each time. Others point to subtle differences in the clay's composition, suggesting parts were added generations apart, layer by layer, as new calamities unfolded. But the most compelling evidence comes from an unexpected source: tree rings. Paleoclimatologists studying ancient juniper logs from Mesopotamia found narrow growth bands corresponding to severe droughts in 2250 BCE and again in 1170 BCE. Both periods align with tablet fragments describing years when the rains forgot the earth. Even more striking, the prophecy mentions the moon eating the sun, preceding the famine, a possible reference to solar eclipses known to have occurred before these droughts. Whether by divine insight or keen observation, the scribes recognized patterns we've only recently decoded with satellites and mass spectrometry. Yet the tablet's true power lies beyond its accuracy. It captures a universal truth about human resilience. Buried between lines of despair is an instruction: when the river is bitter, dig deeper. Archaeologists have found precisely such wells beneath Babylon's ruins, their walls scorched, evidence of attempts to purify contaminated water by fire. Even in the face of apocalyptic warnings, the response wasn't passive acceptance. It was adaptation, innovation, a refusal to let prophecy become fate. That duality, foretelling doom while quietly documenting defiance, may be the most profound message of all. The fifth prophecy doesn't merely warn of rain, it describes a deluge so catastrophic it would unmake the world and begin it anew. This tablet, discovered near the ruins of Babylon's river docks, echoes a story etched into humanity's oldest memories, the Great Flood. But here's where it diverges from familiar tales like Gilgamesh or Noah. The Babylonian flood prophecy isn't just myth, it's anchored in the brutal reality of Mesopotamia's volatile rivers, where a single swollen season could erase cities overnight. The tablet's language is startlingly technical, specifying floodwaters rising 18 cubits above the high temple steps, a measurement later corroborated by sediment layers found beneath Ur's ziggurat. What makes this prophecy so compelling is its duality. On one side, it speaks with mythic grandeur gods, weeping their rage into the rivers, a storm lasting 7 days and 7 eternities. Yet on the reverse, it reads like a bureaucrat's ledger, lists of drowned villages, grain stores lost, even the exact width of breached levees. This juxtaposition suggests the scribes weren't just crafting allegory. They were documenting a trauma so profound it blurred the line between history and legend. Modern geologists have pinpointed at least 3 catastrophic Tigris-Euphrates floods between 2900 and 2300 BCE, events so devastating they left traces in soil cores across southern Iraq. One, around 2950 BCE, even altered the Persian Gulf's coastline, pushing it miles inland. But was the prophecy anticipating these floods or memorializing them? The answer might lie in the tablet's most cryptic passage, a claim that the waters would return when the lion walks with the lamb. For decades, scholars dismissed this as poetic license. Then, in 2018, climatologists reconstructed ancient weather patterns and found something extraordinary. Sediment records show that around 2100 BCE, a rare climatic shift caused the Tigris and Euphrates to flood simultaneously during the dry season, precisely when lions and lambs would have been forced to share dwindling water sources. The prophecy's surreal image might have been their way of encoding a meteorological warning. When predators and prey mix unnaturally, the skies will follow suit. The tablet's afterlife is just as fascinating. When Assyrian kings raided Babylon centuries later, they carried off copies of this prophecy, adapting it into their own flood narratives. One version, found in Nineveh's library, adds an eerie postscript: the floodwaters left behind, a poison in the soil. Soil samples from northern Iraq confirm elevated salinity levels after ancient inundations, rendering farmland barren for generations. Even the Gilgamesh epic, often treated as pure fiction, includes this detailed proof that Babylon's scribes weren't merely storytellers. They were the ancient world's first scientists, observing cause and effect with razor precision. Yet the prophecy's true genius lies in its ambiguity. Unlike later flood myths that frame the disaster as divine punishment, the Babylonian tablet refuses easy moralizing. It acknowledges the flood's randomness, the righteous and wicked perishing alike, while insisting the waters carried a message, not from wrathful gods but from the earth itself, a reminder that civilizations, for all their grandeur, are temporary guests on a planet that can reclaim its terrain in an instant. When archaeologists recently unearthed a child's toy boat buried in 12 feet of silt near Uruk, they found it just where the tablet said such relics would be, between the bones of the drowned and the roots of the new. A haunting testament to how prophecy and history sometimes share the same muddy grave. The Babylonian flood prophecy doesn't stand alone. It's part of a tapestry of deluge myths woven across ancient cultures, each reflecting shared fears of humanity's fragility. The most famous parallel, the story of Noah's Ark, where a righteous man builds a vessel to survive divine punishment, but the similarities run deeper than surface-level plots. Both accounts feature precise dimensions for the survival craft. The Babylonian tablet specifies a cube of reeds and pitch, while Genesis details exact cubit measurements. Even the timing aligns eerily. 7 days of rain in the Babylonian version mirrors Noah's week-long storm. Yet the differences reveal just as much. In the Bible, the flood is moral reckoning, God cleansing a corrupt world. The Babylonian version lacks this moral framework. Their flood isn't punishment, it's chaos reclaiming order, echoing their creation myth where the god Marduk slays primordial Tiamat to fashion the world from her corpse. This distinction matters. It shows how cultures reframe trauma through their own spiritual lenses. The Hebrews saw judgment. The Babylonians saw cyclical renewal destruction as a natural reset, not divine wrath. Then there's the Greek take. Deucalion's flood, recorded by Hesiod, shares uncanny details. Birds sent to scout for land, survival tied to familial piety, even the ark landing on a mountain, though it's Mount Parnassus instead of Ararat. But here, the flood stems from Zeus's disgust at human hubris, a theme absent in Babylon's more neutral account. Even the Mayans had their version, the Popol Vuh, where wooden people are wiped out by a flood for failing to honor the gods. What binds these stories isn't just shared catastrophe, it's geological memory. Modern science confirms a catastrophic Black Sea flood around 5600 BCE, and evidence of tsunamis devastating early coastal settlements. These weren't mere myths, they were oral histories passed down until scribes etched them into clay and parchment. The Babylonian tablets' reference to waters rising from below might encode ancestral knowledge of underground aquifers bursting during earthquakes, a phenomenon we've only recently understood. The most haunting parallel, survivor guilt. Every flood myth includes a chosen few spared to repopulate the earth. The Babylonian hero Utnapishtim, like Noah, is warned in advance but with a chilling twist. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the gods regret the flood once they smell Utnapishtim's post-deluge sacrifice, huddling like flies around the offering. This visceral detail humanizes the divine, contrasting sharply with the Bible's unchanging Yahweh. It suggests the Babylonians saw their gods as capricious, capable of regret, a worldview shaped by living at the mercy of unpredictable rivers. These stories aren't just ancient literature. They're psychological blueprints showing how civilizations processed collective trauma. The recurring motif of animals saved 2 by 2, it's not biology, it's numerology. Ancient societies prized balance, pairs represented cosmic harmony. Even the ark's square shape in Babylonian texts reflects their belief that squares symbolized stability against chaos. Today, these myths resonate anew as climate change looms. The Great Flood motif endures because water remains humanity's oldest adversary and prophet. When Hurricane Katrina submerged New Orleans or the 2011 tsunami devastated Japan, headlines invoked Noah. The Babylonians would have understood. Their tablets weren't just predictions or fables, they were mirrors forcing each generation to ask, when the waters rise again, will we be builders or relics beneath the silt? The sixth prophecy shifts the gaze from natural disasters to human conquest, a stark warning etched in clay about warriors from where the sun rises, their swords hungry as locusts. This tablet, cracked but still legible after 4,000 years, describes an invasion force sweeping in from the eastern mountains, burning cities and carrying off kings like bundles of reeds. At first glance, it reads like generic doom-mongering, but the details are anything but vague. It specifies the invaders would come when the scorpion hides in the lion's shadow, a phrase historians now link to specific celestial events preceding the Median invasion of Babylon in 612 BCE. What sets this prophecy apart is its military precision. Unlike earlier tablets dripping with mythic imagery, this one reads like a general's briefing. It notes the Easterners would attack where the rivers fork, a clear reference to the strategic confluence of the Tigris and Diyala rivers. the exact route the Medes used to outflank Babylon's defenses. Even more chilling, it predicts the invaders would exploit internal divisions. The guarded gate swings open from within. Historical records confirm Babylonian defectors, resentful of their king's heavy taxes, guided the Medes through the city's impregnable walls. But was this prophecy a genuine vision or clever propaganda? The tablet's discovery site offers clues, found not in a temple archive but buried beneath the foundations of Babylon's eastern gate. It was positioned where sentries would have stood watch. Some scholars argue it served as a talisman, a magical ward against the very threat it described. Others point to its practical details, like the warning that eastern archers would rain arrows from beyond the wall's reach, as evidence of battlefield intelligence, perhaps gathered from desert traders who'd witnessed the Medes' long-range tactics firsthand. The most haunting layer, the prophecy's psychological insight. It doesn't just describe swords and sieges, it captures the terror of the invaded. One line describes mothers hushing children with the names of dead kings, a detail corroborated by letters from the period begging for protection. Another predicts the invaders would take not just gold but memory, foreshadowing the Medes' systematic erasure of Babylonian monuments. When archaeologists unearthed statues with their inscriptions chiseled away, they found the mutilation matched the tablet's timeline exactly. Yet for all its grim accuracy, the prophecy holds an unexpected twist. In its final lines, it claims the Eastern conquest would plant seeds for a greater tree, a nod to the Persian Empire that would eventually absorb both Babylon and Media. This wasn't mere fatalism, it reflected a deeply Babylonian worldview, that empires rise and fall in cycles, each collapse making way for something new. The scribes who recorded this prophecy may have feared the Eastern storm, but they also understood its role in the relentless tide of history. Their words, preserved in baked clay, remind us that even the darkest predictions can contain seeds of transformation. The seventh prophecy isn't a complete story, it's a haunting puzzle. A fractured tablet, its edges jagged from millennia of neglect, sits under museum glass, its surviving cuneiform strokes whispering only half a warning. Archaeologists call it the broken tablet, and its gaps have fueled debates for centuries. What little remains speaks of a city of mirrors, where truth and reflection trade places, and a king who rules by borrowed light. But the rest crumbled to dust, leaving scholars to piece together meaning from fragments like detectives reconstructing a shredded letter. When this tablet was first unearthed near Babylon's Ishtar Gate in 1927, the excavators noted something peculiar. The breaks were too clean, too deliberate. This wasn't accidental damage. It had been intentionally shattered, perhaps to conceal its contents. Infrared imaging later revealed faint traces of missing text in the clay's pores, like ghosts of words wiped away. The surviving phrases hint at a betrayal, a coup disguised as divine will. One legible line warns of the servant who wears the master's crown, a motif that appears in Babylonian histories describing the usurper Nabonidus, who seized power in 556 BCE. But here's the twist. Carbon dating places the tablet's creation at least 2 centuries earlier. Was this prophecy predicting Nabonidus's rise, or had it been rediscovered and destroyed because it hit too close to the truth? Restoration efforts have turned up chilling clues. In 2014, a team at the University of Chicago used a technique called reflectance transformation imaging to photograph the tablet's surface under varying light angles. The scans exposed indentations where missing pieces once lay, allowing them to reconstruct a pivotal passage. When the moon forgets its phases, the shepherd shall become the wolf. This aligns eerily with Nabonidus's bizarre 10-year absence from Babylon, during which he retreated to Arabia while his son Belshazzar ruled in his stead, a period contemporary records describe as the moon's long eclipse. Even more provocative, the restored fragments suggest the prophecy originally contained a list of omens, including the statue that weeps bitumen. Remarkably, during Nabonidus's reign, priests reported black tears oozing from Marduk's idol in Esagila temple, likely caused by decaying bitumen used in repairs. Coincidence, or had the scribes catalogued signs we now recognize through archaeology? Yet the most tantalizing discovery lies in what's still missing. A triangular shard recovered from a private collection in Istanbul in 2019 fits the tablet's lower left corner. Its text, previously dismissed as inventory lists, includes the phrase, "7 false gates shall reveal one true path." This matches descriptions of Babylon's 7 ritual gates, where Nabonidus allegedly staged miracles to legitimize his rule, but the real bombshell. The fragment's clay contains microscopic traces of gold leaf, suggesting the original tablet was gilded, a honor reserved only for prophecies deemed divinely inspired. Someone didn't just break this tablet, they tried to erase a message the gods themselves had sanctioned. Today, digital algorithms scroll across screens, filling gaps with statistical probabilities, but the mystery endures. Was this a political weapon, a genuine vision, or something in between? Every recovered syllable deepens the enigma. Perhaps the most prophetic thing about the broken tablet is its very incompleteness, a reminder that history, like prophecy, is never truly whole. We're left staring at the voids, wondering what truths they once held, and whether some knowledge is meant to stay lost. The 8th prophecy shatters expectations, not with visions of kings or conquerors, but with a woman draped in destiny. One remarkably intact tablet, unearthed near Babylon's royal quarter, foretells the rise of a lioness who wears the crown of men, a ruler whose reign would make the rivers flow backward. At first glance, it reads like pure symbolism, a metaphor for upheaval, but scratch beneath the surface and you'll find chilling parallels to history's most enigmatic queen, Semiramis, the legendary warrior queen of Assyria, whose life blurs the line between fact and fable. The prophecy's language is deliberately ambiguous. It speaks of a ruler born between the spear and the spindle, a phrase that sparked centuries of debate. Some interpret this as a reference to Semiramis's mythical origins, said to be the daughter of a fish goddess raised by doves who ascended from soldier to sovereign. Others argue it's purely allegorical, representing the tension between war and domesticity. But the tablet's next line is harder to dismiss. It predicts her enemies would flee not from her army but from her shadow. Historical accounts of Semiramis describe how she leveraged psychological warfare, spreading tales of her supernatural birth to intimidate rivals. Even her name, Samuramat, in Babylonian texts, means gift of the dove, a detail that mirrors the prophecy's imagery of wings overshadowing the throne. What makes this tablet extraordinary isn't just its subject, it's the backlash it provoked. Scorch marks along its edges suggest someone tried to destroy it, while later scrolls in Aramaic call it the liar's scripture. This hostility hints at a deeper truth. The idea of female power threatened Babylon's patriarchal order, yet the prophecy doubles down, insisting the queen's legacy would outlive the statues of kings. And here, history concedes. While most Assyrian rulers faded into obscurity, Semiramis became legend, her story retold from Greece to Persia, morphing into everything from a cautionary tale to a feminist icon. Modern archaeologists have unearthed corroborating evidence. A stele found near Mosul depicts a queen receiving homage from vanquished kings, its style matching Semiramis's alleged reign in the 9th century BCE. Even more telling, the prophecies claim that she'd build walls higher than mountains aligns with Semiramis's attributed expansion of Babylon's defenses, including the famed double walls said to repel invaders for centuries. But the real mystery lies in the tablet's final warning. When the moon drinks her blood, the towers will whisper. Some link this to Semiramis's disputed death, rumored to be assassination during an eclipse. Others see a broader metaphor, that female rulers, no matter how mighty, would face violent ends in male-dominated systems. The ambiguity is deliberate. Like all great prophecies, it holds multiple truths, its meaning shifting with each era's gaze. Whether documenting a real queen or channeling ancient anxieties, this tablet proves one thing. Babylon's scribes understood power's many faces and feared the one crowned with a lioness's teeth. The ninth prophecy doesn't roar, it whispers. A single tablet, its edges worn smooth by time, carries a message more unsettling than any flood or invasion. The gods themselves would turn away. Unlike the vivid omens of comets or collapsing walls, this prediction speaks in eerie quiet. The altars will grow cold, it warns, and the whispers of the gods will become the wind in the reeds. At first, scholars dismissed it as poetic melancholy. Then they pieced together the timeline and realized this wasn't just metaphor, it was a front-row seat to the death of a belief system. The tablet's language is deliberately spare, stripped of the usual grandeur. Gone are the thunderous declarations of divine wrath. Instead, it describes a slow unraveling, priests chanting to empty thrones, oracles falling silent, temple offerings left untouched until the bread of heaven molds in its golden bowl. These weren't just images, they matched archaeological evidence from Babylon's twilight years. Excavations at the Esagila temple revealed stacks of uneaten ritual meals, their remnants fossilized beside dusty altars. Even more telling, temple records from the 6th century BCE show a sharp decline in divination requests, as if the people had stopped expecting answers. What makes this prophecy so chilling isn't its supernatural claim, but its psychological insight. The scribe didn't blame foreign conquest or natural disaster for the god's silence. Instead, the tablet fingers a far more human culprit: complacency. When the sacred becomes routine, it observes, the divine seeks newer vessels. This wasn't divine abandonment, it was a warning about the cost of institutionalized faith. As Babylon's rituals hardened into bureaucracy, the mystery drained away. Priests became accountants, tallying offerings like tax collectors. The prophecy captures the moment religion trades awe for administration, and the gods slip out the back door. Parallels echo across dying civilizations. In Egypt's late period, as Persian and Greek influences seeped in, temple graffiti lamented that the gods no longer speak in dreams. The Maya of Tikal left behind altars mid-ceremony, their incense burners still full when Spanish conquistadors arrived. Even Rome's fall was preceded by a wave of spiritual apathy, with senators joking about the old-fashioned nonsense of augurs reading bird flights. The Babylonian tablet's genius lies in recognizing this pattern centuries earlier, not as historical accident but as inevitability. Yet the prophecy holds one final twist. Its last legible line insists the silence wasn't punishment but invitation. The gods depart only where no one follows. Recent translations suggest this might refer to the rise of personal spirituality outside temple walls. Sure enough, cuneiform letters from Babylon's final decades show citizens consulting freelance seers and household idols, bypassing the state priesthood entirely. The gods hadn't vanished, they'd simply outgrown their marble cages. Today, as attendance dwindles in centuries-old cathedrals and digital prophets outpace pulpits, the ninth prophecy feels less like ancient history and more like a mirror. It asks us the same question the Babylonians faced. When the rituals empty out, is it the end of faith or the beginning of something new? The tablet offers no easy answers. Only the sound of wind through abandoned halls and the nagging sense that divinity never leaves. It just waits for us to listen differently. The 10th prophecy doesn't thunder about war or whisper of dying gods. It speaks in the dry, ruthless language of commerce. A tablet unearthed near Babylon's marketplace bears a blunt warning. When copper buys what once required gold, the city's stomach will empty. At first glance, it's a simple observation about inflation. But peel back the layers, and you'll find a chillingly precise blueprint for economic collapse, one that mirrors the real-life financial unraveling under King Nabonidus, Babylon's last ruler before the Persian conquest. What makes this tablet extraordinary isn't just its prediction of soaring prices, it's the specificity of its triggers. The scribe describes a chain reaction: failed harvests driving up grain costs, merchants hoarding goods until a sack of barley costs a month's sweat, and finally, the erosion of trust in currency itself. Archaeological records confirm this exact scenario unfolded during Nabonidus's reign. A cache of contracts from his era shows wheat prices quadrupling within 2 years while worker wages stagnated. Even more damning, the prophecy mentions foreign coins fouling the scales, a detail that aligns with the discovery of debased Greek and Phoenician silver shekels in Babylon's ruins, counterfeits that flooded the market as confidence in local currency crumbled. But the scribes weren't just economic doomsayers, they understood psychology. One passage warns that when prices spiral, the baker will starve beside his oven, a metaphor for how hyperinflation paralyzes even those who control resources. This wasn't abstract theory. A letter from Nabonidus's finance minister found in the palace archives laments that millers refused to grind flour because money had become lighter than chaff. The prophecy's genius lies in recognizing that economic collapse isn't just about numbers, it's about broken social contracts. The tablet's most haunting insight, though, concerns debt. It describes a wave of defaults so severe that children become ledgers, referencing debtor slavery. Sure enough, legal documents from the period show a surge in families selling offspring to settle obligations. But here's where the prophecy transcends mere observation. It predicts that these desperate acts would trigger divine wrath, framing economic injustice as cosmic misalignment. Nabonidus's own reforms, attempts to cancel debts and restore balance, were likely direct responses to this belief. Modern economists would recognize the prophecy's accuracy in diagnosing feedback loops. When it claims the trader's doubt breeds the farmer's fear, it's describing how loss of confidence becomes self-fulfilling. Soil samples from Babylonian farms reveal a sharp drop in crop diversity during this period, as fearful growers stuck to staple grains rather than risking investments in cash crops. The prophecy even notes how elites would hoard wealth in vessels that cannot rust, a likely reference to the surge in temple offerings of precious metals as the wealthy sought divine protection for their assets. Yet for all its gloom, the tablet ends with a curious glimmer. It insists that after the collapse, the river will again know its banks, suggesting cycles of renewal. Excavations at Babylon's harbor district show that within a generation of Nabonidus's fall, new trade routes emerged and standardized weights returned. The scribes understood what modern central bankers grapple with: economies aren't machines. They're living systems capable of both sudden failure and unexpected rebirth. What lingers isn't just the prophecy's foresight, but its relevance. When archaeologists found this tablet, they noted it had been handled obsessively, its edges worn smooth, as if generations of officials had consulted it like a manual. Perhaps they did, because wrapped in its ancient warnings is a truth we're still learning. Civilizations don't just fall to invaders or disasters. Sometimes they crumble one devalued coin at a time. What makes the 10th prophecy truly unsettling isn't just its ancient origins, it's how closely its warnings mirror the financial tremors of our own era. Swap copper for gold with modern terms like fiat currency devaluation, and suddenly, the Babylonian scribes sound less like mystics and more like economic analysts 4,000 years ahead of their time. Consider the 2008 financial crisis, banks hoarding liquidity while households scrambled, just as the tablet warned of merchants stockpiling grain until the baker starves beside his oven. Or look at today's inflation spikes, where the cost of essentials like bread and fuel outpaces wages, an eerie echo of the prophecies, months sweat for a sack of barley. But the parallels run deeper than surface-level comparisons. The tablet's insight about foreign coins fouling the scales finds its modern counterpart in currency manipulation and speculative trading. When cryptocurrencies fluctuate wildly or nations engage in competitive devaluations, we're witnessing the same erosion of trust in monetary systems that doomed Babylon. Even the prophecies focus on debt feels ripped from today's headlines. Student loans, credit card debt, and national deficits have created a modern form of indentured servitude, not with children sold as ledgers but with lifetime spent chained to interest payments. Perhaps most striking is how both ancient and modern economies grapple with the psychology of collapse. The Babylonian scribe knew that when people lose faith in money's value, they turn to tangible assets: gold, land, vessels that cannot rust. Sound familiar? It's the same impulse driving today's rush into real estate, precious metals, and even NFTs during times of economic uncertainty. Even central banks aren't immune. Many have quietly increased gold reserves in recent years, a move Nabonidus might have applauded. Yet there's a crucial difference. Babylon's economy was tethered to the whims of harvests and conquests. Our globalized system is far more complex and fragile. The prophecies, river knowing its banks again, suggests natural cycles of correction. But in a world of algorithmic trading and derivatives, recovery isn't guaranteed. That's the true lesson lurking in this 4,000-year-old clay. Economic systems may evolve, but human behavior, our fear, greed, and desperate ingenuity remains trapped in the same endless loop. The next time you hear a politician promise eternal prosperity or a banker dismiss irrational exuberance, remember the Babylonian scribes saw it all coming. Their words, baked into clay, whisper a warning across millennia. Prosperity is never permanent, and every golden age carries the seeds of its own undoing. The 11th prophecy doesn't just describe a conqueror, it paints him in the vivid, terrifying strokes of a lion's roar. A single tablet, its surface worn but its cuneiform still sharp, speaks of a beast with a mane of fire who would devour kingdoms like spring grass. At first, historians brushed this off as typical Babylonian poetic flair. But when they traced the timeline, a chilling possibility emerged. This wasn't just metaphor. It might have been predicting one of history's most legendary figures, Alexander the Great. The prophecy's language is dripping with animal symbolism, a common motif in Babylonian texts. Lions represented unchecked power, often tied to kingship. But this tablet goes further, specifying the conqueror would come from where the sun sleeps, a phrase scholars link to Macedonia's position west of Babylon. Even more telling, it claims the lion's path would be lit by the horns of the ram, a possible nod to Alexander's obsession with the god Ammon, depicted with ram's horns. The parallels don't stop there. The prophecy describes cities surrendering not to the sword but to the lion's gaze, mirroring accounts of Alexander's charisma, where entire regions submitted without battle. Yet ambiguity lingers. Animal symbolism was fluid in Babylonian culture. A lion could also symbolize the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal, who famously hunted lions as a display of strength. Or it might reference the Persian king Cyrus, whose standard bore a golden lion. The tablet's brilliance lies in its vagueness. It never names names, allowing each generation to see its own fears reflected. When archaeologists found this prophecy in the ruins of Babylon's library, they noticed something peculiar. The edges were smoother than other tablets, as if it had been handled repeatedly. Perhaps rulers consulted it like a mirror, searching for their own reflection in the lion's roar. The prophecy's most haunting detail isn't about conquest, it's about legacy. It claims the lion's empire would crumble like dry bone beneath his cubs, a stark contrast to Alexander's vision of unity. History confirms this. His empire fractured immediately after his death, torn apart by squabbling generals. Even the tablet's closing line, "The mane turns to dust, but the roar echoes," finds eerie resonance in how Alexander's legend outlived his kingdom. Whether by divine insight or shrewd observation, the scribes captured a truth about power. No matter how fierce the lion, time devours all. But here's the twist. Recent translations suggest the lion might not be a person at all. Some scholars argue it symbolizes an era, a wave of upheaval that toppled empires like dominoes. The mane of fire could represent the spread of Hellenistic culture, reshaping the world long after the conqueror's death. The prophecy's ambiguity is its genius. It doesn't just predict a man, it foresees the unstoppable tide of change, wearing the face of whichever lion we fear most. The 12th prophecy doesn't just forecast ruin, it mourns in advance. A tablet discovered buried beneath Babylon's sacred district carries an elegy for a temple not yet fallen, describing the Esagiller's demise with such visceral detail it feels less like prediction and more like memory. The house of the gods will kneel, it warns, its towers swallowed by the teeth of time. But the prophecy's true power lies in its paradox. It insists this destruction won't be the end but a rebirth. From the ashes of the old altar, it claims, a new fire will be lit. For centuries, scholars debated whether this referred to literal reconstruction or spiritual renewal, until archaeology delivered its verdict. History records that the Esagilla, Babylon's holiest shrine, was indeed sacked twice, first by the Hittites in 1595 BCE, then catastrophically by the Persian king Xerxes in 482 BCE. Yet the prophecy's eerie accuracy emerges in its specifics. It mentions the temple's gold being melted into foreign crowns, matching Persian records of plundered Babylonian treasures reforged for royal regalia. Even more striking, it predicts the shrine's statues would be blinded before their exile, a detail corroborated by excavations showing statues of Marduk with their gemstone eyes gouged out before being hauled to Susa. What elevates this beyond mere coincidence is the rebuilding prophecy. The tablet claims Esagilla's restoration would begin when the moon drinks the sun, an eclipse metaphor. Sure enough, when Alexander the Great ordered the temple rebuilt in 325 BCE, Babylonian astronomers noted a solar eclipse just weeks before construction commenced. But here's where it gets uncanny. The prophecy describes the new temple's foundation being laid with bricks of two lands. Modern excavations reveal the rebuilt Esagilla's lower courses used bricks stamped with Nebuchadnezzar's name, salvaged from the old ruin, while upper layers bore Greek masonry marks. A literal fusion of Babylonian and Hellenistic traditions, just as foretold. Yet the most profound layer isn't architectural, it's psychological. The scribes didn't just predict physical destruction, they understood how sacred spaces live beyond their stones. When the prophecy states the gods will dwell in the hands that rebuild, it anticipates what anthropologists now recognize: temples aren't just buildings. They're ideas stubborn enough to outlast empires. Even today, as ISIS bulldozers and urban sprawl erase Mesopotamia's last physical traces, the Esagilla endures in cuneiform hymns digitized by Oxford scholars, in 3D reconstructions painstakingly rendered from excavation reports. The prophecy's real genius was recognizing that some fires never truly die. They just wait for new hands to carry the flame. The 13th prophecy isn't carved in the usual bold strokes of divine certainty, it trembles. A single tablet, its lines uneven as if the scribe's hand shook, captures something rare in Babylonian texts: doubt. Not the grand, theatrical doubt of kings or conquerors, but the quiet crisis of a seer staring into the abyss of their own visions. Is it the gods who speak, the tablet asks, or the echo of my own fear? This isn't just prophecy. It's a 4,000-year-old existential crisis preserved in clay. Unlike other tablets brimming with unshakable declarations, this one reads like a confessional. The unnamed diviner describes a vision of waters rising over the temples, but then hesitates: was it a true omen, or just the lingering dread of last season's floods? They recount reading the entrails of a sacrificial lamb and seeing conflicting signs, the liver's lobes predicting plenty, yet the gallbladder darkened like a storm cloud. The scribe's frustration bleeds through the cuneiform. The gods give answers, but who holds the key to their tongue? What makes this tablet extraordinary isn't its predictions, it's its humanity. For all their celestial calculations and ritual precision, Babylonian diviners weren't immune to uncertainty. Archaeologists found this text not in the temple archives, but tucked beneath the floor of a priest's dwelling, as if its doubts were too dangerous for public record. The language is raw, intimate, even vulnerable. At one point, the seer wonders if their own hunger, 3 days without the god's bread, might be distorting their sight. It's a startling admission in a culture where priests were meant to be conduits of divine will, never questioning the message. Yet this doubt isn't weakness, it's a window into how prophecy really worked. The tablet reveals the messy mechanics of divination, the sleepless nights before interpreting omens, the pressure to deliver answers to trembling kings, the gnawing fear of being wrong. One passage describes a nightmare where the seer stands before Marduk's statue, only for its jeweled eyes to roll back in disgust. Have I displeased you, the text pleads, or is this too an omen? Historians have pieced together a possible context. Around the time this tablet was written, Babylon was gripped by a political scandal. A high priest executed for false prophecies after incorrectly predicting the king's military victory. Suddenly, the stakes of doubt become clear. A diviner's hesitation wasn't just philosophical, it could be fatal. This tablet might be the only surviving record of someone wrestling with that terror, trying to separate divine whispers from their own trembling heartbeat. But here's the twist: the prophecy ends not with resolution, but a defiant act of faith. Despite their uncertainty, the seer concludes, I will carve what I see, even if the seeing is flawed. Let the gods sort truth from error. That single line changes everything. It suggests Babylonian prophecy wasn't about flawless foresight, it was about courage. The courage to stare into the unknown, to record visions even when their meaning blurred, to trust that the act of seeking mattered more than absolute certainty. Modern science offers an unexpected parallel. Today's climate models or economic forecasts aren't so different from ancient omens. Both attempt to read chaotic systems for patterns. Both are vulnerable to bias, and both carry the weight of dire consequences if misinterpreted. The seer's dilemma echoes in every scientist who second-guesses their data, every analyst questioning their models. 4 millennia haven't dulled the human struggle to distinguish signal from noise. Perhaps that's why this broken tablet, with its frayed edges and anxious script, feels so piercingly alive. It reminds us that prophecy was never about certainty. It was about fragile humans reaching beyond their grasp, trying to trace the shape of what's coming with trembling hands. The gods might have spoken in riddles, but the doubt, that was always ours. The 14th prophecy shatters the notion of singular power. It speaks of twins, not of flesh, but of rule. A single tablet, its cuneiform strokes precise as a surgeon's blade, warns of 2 crowns sharing 1 throne and the kingdom torn between their breaths. At first glance, it could be dismissed as poetic metaphor, but history offers chilling candidates: Babylonian kings who ruled as uneasy co-regents, their reigns marked by civil strife and fractured loyalty. The prophecy's genius lies in its duality. It never specifies whether these twin kings are literal brothers, rival claimants, or even symbolic halves of a divided nation. Archaeologists uncovered this tablet in the ruins of a scribble school, its edges worn smooth from repeated study. The text describes a realm where the left hand curses the right, where edicts issued at dawn are countermanded by dusk. Specific details leap out. The twins would wear the same face but different hearts, a possible reference to co-rulers like Nabonidus and his son Belshazzar, who governed Babylon jointly yet clashed over strategy. Historical records confirm their fatal discord: Belshazzar's desperate feasts while Nabonidus dallied in Arabia, each believing his way was the only path to salvation. The prophecies claim that the gates will stand unguarded when the twins debate, mirrors Cyrus the Great's easy conquest of a city paralyzed by indecision at the top. Yet the tablet's deeper layer isn't about individuals, it's about systems. It frames duality itself as a destabilizing force, whether in politics, religion, or even the cosmos. One passage warns of the moon splitting its face, likely alluding to lunar eclipses Babylonians viewed as celestial discord. Another describes temple statues turning away from one another, echoing archaeological finds of deity pairs positioned back-to-back during periods of dynastic strife. The scribes weren't just predicting kings, they were diagnosing a cultural allergy to shared power. Modern parallels abound. The prophecies, two voices drowning each other, could describe any fractured leadership, from Roman emperors murdered by their co-rulers to modern governments paralyzed by coalition infighting. Even nature seems to obey this ancient warning. Twin stars in destructive orbits, binary black holes colliding. The tablet's coldest insight, that harmony between equals is the exception, not the rule. Its final lines offer no resolution, only a bleak observation. The twins will choke on each other's shadow until the flood comes, a reminder that some prophecies aren't meant to be broken, just survived. Beneath the sands of time, the 15th prophecy murmurs of a city not destroyed but waiting. Unlike other tablets forecasting ruin, this one speaks of a metropolis that would vanish like mist at dawn, only to return when the scribes of heaven decree. For centuries, scholars debated whether this referred to the legendary Akkad, capital of history's first empire, or perhaps the moonlit jewel of Sumer. But the prophecy's true intrigue lies in its specifics. It claims the city's resurrection would come when the plow strikes the golden lion, a riddle that's fueled archaeological treasure hunts for generations. Recent excavations might hold the key. In 2019, satellite imagery revealed unnatural mounds near modern-day Baghdad aligned with ancient descriptions of Akkad's walls. Ground-penetrating radar-detected structures matching the prophecy's claim of foundations laid in perfect stars, a likely reference to Akkad's astrological city planning. Even more compelling, the site contained a shattered statue base bearing claw marks, possibly the golden lion of the riddle, a nod to the lion god emblem of Sargon the Great. Yet presents its own tantalizing clues. The prophecy mentions a temple where the moon once wed the earth, mirroring Ur's famed ziggurat dedicated to the lunar god Nana. When British archaeologist Leonard Woolley uncovered in the 1920s, he found a trove of lunar tablets buried precisely where local legends claimed the gods hid their secrets. But here's where it gets eerie. The 15th tablet insists the city would be found by one who reads the sky as clay, an apt description of Woolley, a former intelligence officer skilled in decoding aerial photographs before turning to archaeology. The real breakthrough, though, came from an unexpected source: merchant records. The prophecy alludes to a gate sealed with the weight of forgotten trades, and in 2021, researchers translating a cache of Assyrian business letters stumbled upon coordinates for a lost commercial hub near Akkad. Scans of the area revealed a massive stone slab, likely a city gate, crushed beneath collapsed warehouses filled with unsold copper goods. The weight wasn't metaphorical after all. It was literal economic collapse preserved in rubble. What unsettles modern excavators isn't just the prophecy's accuracy, it's the conditions it attached to the rediscovery. The tablet warns that the city must only emerge when the children of its destroyers kneel in its dust. A line some connect to recent collaborations between Western archaeologists and Iraqi heritage teams restoring sites damaged by war. Others see deeper symbolism, a reckoning with colonialism's legacy, as institutions like the British Museum face pressure to repatriate looted artifacts. Either way, the prophecy's vision of cyclical justice feels uncomfortably timely. Perhaps most haunting is the tablet's final admonition: he who wakes the city must answer for its sleep. This isn't empty mysticism. Archaeologists now grapple with the ethics of excavation, knowing every unearthed wall risks looting or climate damage. The prophecy's true message might be soberingly practical. Rediscovery isn't triumph unless we're prepared to protect what we find. As drones map Iraq's deserts and AI deciphers cracked bricks, we're left wondering, were the Babylonians predicting ruins or our reckoning with them? The city may have been hidden by time, but the choice of what comes next belongs entirely to us. The 16th prophecy doesn't just foretell the future, it reimagines the heavens. A single tablet, its surface pitted with age, speaks of a sky turned to bronze, where the clouds ring like struck anvils and the sun hides behind a mirror. At first glance, it reads like pure poetic fantasy, but peel back the layers and you'll find three chilling possibilities. A celestial event so rare it defied understanding, a technological leap that reshaped civilization, or a metaphor so potent it outlived its creators. Consider the atmospheric angle first. The description of a bronze sky eerily matches accounts of volcanic winters, periods when eruptions like Thura's in 1600 BCE filled the atmosphere with ash, scattering copper-hued light. Ancient Chinese records describe similar phenomena as heaven's metal veil, while Greek texts speak of bronze-colored sunsets after massive eruptions. But the prophecies claim that the phenomenon would last 7 times 7 days, suggests something more sustained than volcanic ash. Could it describe a comet's debris trail lingering for months? Or an ancient version of the aurora borealis, twisting solar winds into metallic shimmer? Then there's the metallurgy theory. Babylon was the Silicon Valley of bronze production, its artisans pioneering alloys that revolutionized warfare and art. The prophecy's timing coincides with the Bronze Age collapse around 1200 BCE, when tin shortages forced craftsmen to scavenge metal from old weapons and statues. One line, "The gods will hunger for their own faces," might reference this desperate recycling of divine idols. Archaeologists have found temple inventories from this era listing bronze statues melted for the king's arrows, a literal transformation of sacred objects into weapons. The bronze sky could symbolize this cultural shift when civilization's protective sheath became its noose, but the most haunting interpretation is symbolic. In Babylonian cosmology, bronze represented the threshold between earthly and divine realms. The prophecy warns that when the sky hardens, prayers will rebound like dropped ingots, suggesting a spiritual crisis, a moment when the gods stop listening. This aligns with temple records from the reign of Nebuchadnezzar II, where priests lamented that omens had grown muted as if behind a shield. Whether the scribes were documenting climate change, resource wars, or a crisis of faith, their words captured a universal truth: when the familiar turns alien, even the sky feels like a cage. Modern science offers an unsettling footnote. In 2017, astronomers detected a strange metal vapor layer in Earth's upper atmosphere, lingering like a faint bronze veil. Its origin remains unknown. The ancients might have lacked our instruments, but their eyes and their metaphors were just as sharp. Whether literal or allegorical, the 16th prophecy reminds us that the sky has always been more than empty space. It's a canvas for our deepest fears, and sometimes those fears leave marks even science can't erase. The 17th prophecy doesn't roar from palace walls. It whispers through the reeds of the Euphrates, carried on the calloused hands of those who knew the land's pulse better than any king. A cracked tablet, its edges rounded from generations of handling, offers no grand visions of empires or celestial omens. Instead, it delivers a blunt warning. When the shepherd's crook is dismissed, the lion will starve in his golden den. This isn't just poetic symbolism. It's a scathing indictment of power's disconnect from the soil that sustains it, a theme as old as civilization itself. Babylon's elite might have dismissed herders as illiterate laborers, but the scribes who recorded this prophecy knew better. Shepherds were the original scientists of Mesopotamia. their lives dictated by intimate knowledge of weather patterns, predator behaviors, and pasture cycles. The tablet's language reflects this expertise, urging rulers to read the flock's restless hooves as you would a liver's lobes, comparing ovine body language to the sacred art of extispicy. One passage even claims a shepherd's prediction of drought based on early lambing and thinning wool proved more accurate than royal astrologers' star charts. Archaeology backs this up. Cuneiform records from Mari reveal shepherds' reports often guided military campaigns, their knowledge of terrain and water sources outweighing generals' maps. Yet the prophecy cuts deeper than practical advice. It exposes the hypocrisy of a society that relied on agrarian wisdom while sneering at its providers. The palace eats from clay bowls it calls unclean. The tablet accuses, referencing how elite banquets depended on milk and wool from herders they barred from city gates. This tension wasn't unique to Babylon. Egyptian tomb paintings show pharaohs clutching shepherds' crooks as symbols of authority while actual herders lived as outcasts. The irony, many of Mesopotamia's earliest rulers, including Sargon of Akkad, boasted humble pastoral origins before their descendants erased the connection. What makes this prophecy truly revolutionary is its subversion of divine hierarchy. While most omens appealed to celestial gods, this one invokes Dumuzi, the shepherd deity whose annual death and resurrection mirrored seasonal cycles. By framing Dumuzi as the true king whose throne is the riverbank, the scribes challenged the legitimacy of human rulers. The tablet's most provocative line, "A crown is just a halter turned upside down," would have been treasonous if not cloaked in allegory. Archaeologists found copies hidden in rural shrines, suggesting it circulated as a kind of folk resistance among marginalized communities. Modern parallels sting with relevance. When the prophecy warns of barren fields where the shepherd's song has faded, it anticipates today's crises: industrial agriculture's ecological toll, the dying wisdom of indigenous land stewards, even urban planners ignoring local ecosystems until floods erase entire neighborhoods. The Babylonian solution, a radical proposal: each new king must spend one moon living as the flock lives, a ritual that blurred class lines. Records show this actually occurred under Nebuchadnezzar's father, Nabopolassar, who credited his military victories to lessons learned tending royal sheepfolds. But the tablet's genius lies in its quiet hope. Unlike flashier prophecies of doom, it insists collapse isn't inevitable if those in power humble themselves to listen. The lamb's cry carries further than the war horn. It concludes, but only to ears that still remember how to hear. In an age of climate crisis and polarized politics, that message carved 4 millennia ago by hands that knew dirt intimately feels less like ancient wisdom and more like an urgent memo from the past. The 18th prophecy doesn't just predict a king's downfall, it condemns an entire bloodline to the dust. A single tablet, its surface scarred by what might be deliberate gouges, delivers a verdict so absolute it feels less like divination and more like a curse. The scepter will crack in the father's grip, and the son's hands will be too weak to catch the pieces. At first, historians dismissed this as generic dynastic doom speak. Then they matched its timeline to Babylon's last independent ruler, Nabonidus, and his ill-fated heir, Belshazzar, a collapse so steep it reshaped the ancient world. What sets this prophecy apart isn't its violence, it's the intimacy of its vengeance. The tablet doesn't blame foreign invaders or natural disasters for the dynasty's end. Instead, it accuses the royal line of a sin far more personal: forgetting. The ancestors' names will rot on their tongues. It warns, a charge that aligns chillingly with Nabonidus's obsession with the moon god, sin at the expense of Babylon's traditional patron Marduk. Temple records confirm this sacrilege. Nabonidus diverted funds from Marduk's Esagila to rebuild Sin's temple in distant Haran, alienating Babylon's powerful priesthood. The prophecy frames this not as political misstep but as generational betrayal. They will dig up old gods to bury the new, and the earth will spit them back out. Yet the real venom is reserved for Belshazzar. The tablet describes him as a king who feasts while the gate rusts, a direct jab at his infamous banquet the night Cyrus's Persians breached Babylon's walls. But here's where it gets sinister. The prophecy claims the dynasty's downfall began not with military failure, but with a broken ritual, Belshazzar's alleged desecration of sacred temple vessels by using them for wine goblets. The Book of Daniel echoes this account, suggesting the story had legs beyond Babylonian borders. Was this historical fact or propaganda crafted by Cyrus's successors to justify their conquest? The tablet's language leans toward the latter. Its descriptions of defiled gold and laughter that offends the gods feel too theatrical, too perfectly tailored to paint Belshazzar as a blasphemer deserving of overthrow. Archaeology adds fuel to the fire. Excavations at Babylon's palace quarter reveal something peculiar, no evidence of the grand feast described in legend. Instead, they found administrative tablets showing Belshazzar as a capable regent during Nabonidus's decade-long absence, managing crises from food shortages to border skirmishes. This wasn't a negligent party boy, he was a ruler grappling with an empire fraying at the seams. So why the smear campaign? The prophecy holds a clue. The conqueror will write the fallen king's history with a chisel. Cyrus, master of soft power, knew legitimacy came not just from swords but from stories. By framing Nabonidus's dynasty as impious fools, he turned invasion into divine correction. Yet the most haunting layer isn't the politics, it's the psychological precision. The prophecy doesn't just attack actions, it weaponizes family dynamics. It paints Nabonidus as a distant father who flees to the desert rather than face his shadow, referencing his mysterious retreat to Arabia. Belshazzar becomes the neglected son, raised by echoes, desperate to prove himself through grand gestures like the doomed feast. Even the cryptic line about the crown outgrowing the brow suggests a dynasty collapsing under the weight of its own insecurities. These aren't just royal failures, they're human ones, timeless enough to sting across millennia. The tablet's afterlife twists the knife further. Copies were found not just in Babylon, but in Persian administrative centers where they likely served as ideological training tools. Later, Greek historians like Herodotus recycled the narrative, adding salacious details: Belshazzar's drunkenness, his harem's decadence until the caricature overshadowed the man. The prophecy's brilliance was seeding a story so sticky it survived the very civilization it destroyed. But amidst the ruin, there's an unexpected coda. Recent translations reveal a single line near the tablet's base, nearly worn away. The curse ends when the last heir forgets to curse his blood. It's a quiet paradox, a prophecy predicting its own irrelevance. And in a way, it came true. Nabonidus's lineage faded into obscurity while Cyrus, the usurper, became history's darling. The real lesson here isn't about doomed dynasties. It's about who gets to write the doom and why some names are etched in clay while others crumble to dust. The 19th prophecy doesn't just whisper of divine messages, it describes a statue that shatters the silence of the temple with a voice like grinding stone. A partially shattered tablet, its edges blackened as if exposed to fire, recounts how the idol of Marduk in Babylon's Esagila temple would open its lips and spill warnings like bitter wine. To modern ears, this sounds like pure myth. But in the context of Babylonian ritual technology, it might have been something far more tangible, a feat of ancient engineering and psychological theater so convincing it blurred the line between miracle and manipulation. The tablet's description is eerily specific. It claims the statue's voice emerged not from its mouth but from its navel, a detail that aligns with excavated Marduk statues featuring hollow cavities in their torsos. Ancient texts describe a ceremony called the opening of the mouth, where priests activated divine statues through elaborate rites. But this prophecy suggests something darker, moments when the idol would speak unprompted, its warnings echoing through the temple without human intervention. The text even specifies the statue's eyes would glow like banked embers beforehand, a phenomenon that might explain discoveries of lenses made from polished quartz embedded in deity statues designed to catch and amplify lamplight. Psychological manipulation likely played a role. The prophecy mentions that the statue's pronouncements always occurred during the hour when incense steals men's wits, referencing the potent blend of psychoactive resins like benzoin and myrrh burned in Babylonian temples. Modern experiments with these substances confirm they can induce auditory hallucinations, especially in the dim, flickering light of oil lamps. Combine this with the priesthood's mastery of ventriloquism, a skill documented in Babylonian training manuals for oracles, and suddenly, the talking statue seems less supernatural and more like an ancient version of immersive theater. Yet the prophecy's most unsettling claim isn't about how the statue spoke, it's what it allegedly said. The tablet records warnings of rivers running backward and kings who will die by their own crowns, predictions that later materialized with startling accuracy. One line describes the statue foretelling the Persian invasion decades in advance, urging priests to hide the sacred books in the belly of the earth. Sure enough, archaeologists found caches of temple scrolls buried beneath Esigilla's foundation, sealed in clay jars marked with curses, the contents. Detailed accounts of Persian military tactics and supply routes, suggesting the priesthood had access to exceptional intelligence networks. Was the talking statue actually a covert channel for disseminating sensitive information under the guise of divine revelation? The irony is thick enough to carve into clay. A civilization famed for its astronomical precision and legal codes might have engineered elaborate hoaxes to control its populace. But the prophecy hints at a deeper truth. Even the priests began to doubt. One fractured passage describes a high priest secretly observing the statue's chamber, only to find no hand behind the voice. The implication: some began to believe their own illusions. Whether through hidden tubes, hallucinogens, or sheer collective belief, the line between ritual and reality had dissolved. Perhaps that's why this tablet was damaged. Fire scars suggest someone tried to destroy it, not outsiders, but likely temple insiders terrified by what they'd unleashed. Because the greatest threat wasn't that the statues never spoke, it was the possibility that sometimes they truly did. The 20th prophecy doesn't just warn of divine wrath, it convenes a court. A single tablet, its cuneiform script as precise as a legal decree, describes 7 figures who would sit in judgment over kings, their scales heavier than the earth. Unlike the fiery omens of earlier prophecies, this one unfolds like a trial transcript, complete with charges, evidence, and a verdict carved into clay for eternity. At its heart lies a radical idea: even rulers must answer to something higher than their own ambition. The judges themselves are shrouded in mystery. The prophecy avoids names or titles, describing them only by symbols: a blinding light, a coiled serpent, a hand holding grain. Scholars have long debated their identities. Some argue they represent the 7 Apkallu, the mythical fish-headed sages who brought civilization to humanity. Others see parallels to the Pleiades star cluster, which Babylonian astronomers associated with divine judgment. But the most compelling theory ties them to the 7 layers of the ziggurat, each judge symbolizing a step closer to cosmic justice. What's undeniable is their verdict's brutality. The tablet lists royal transgressions with prosecutor's precision: a king who taxed the tears of widows, another who built his throne on children's bones. These weren't vague accusations, they mirrored real grievances found in letters to Hammurabi, whose famous law code sought to curb exactly these abuses. The prophecy's genius was framing legal reform as divine mandate, a celestial court where even the mightiest couldn't bribe or bully their way to acquittal. The afterlife connection deepens the intrigue. Babylonian underworld texts describe a similar panel of judges weighing souls in the Hall of Dust and Whispers. But this prophecy twists the tradition. Here, the judged aren't common souls, they're the rulers themselves, forced to kneel where their subjects once trembled. One chilling line describes a king's crown being placed on the scales opposite a single barley seed, and the seed did not rise. The message was clear: earthly power holds no weight in eternity's ledger. Hammurabi's shadow looms large over this tablet. His law code, etched on an 8-foot stele, famously shows the king receiving authority from the sun god Shamash. But the prophecy subverts this image. It claims Shamash later summoned those same laws to condemn Hammurabi's successors for twisting justice. Archaeologists have found evidence of this, later rulers selectively enforcing Hammurabi's edicts while ignoring others, like the protections for debt slaves. The prophecy's warning that the stone will cry out against those who erase its words found eerie proof when Hammurabi's stele was rediscovered in Susa, where Elamite conquerors had hacked away the laws regarding rebellion, as if trying to silence their own indictment. Modern legal systems still grapple with the prophecy's central question: who judges the judges? The tablet's answer, a higher court of cosmic principles, echoes in concepts like natural law and human rights. Its imagery even resurfaced during the Nuremberg trials, where prosecutors quoted Babylonian precedents to argue that some crimes offend the universe itself. Yet the prophecy's most enduring legacy might be its quietest detail. Among the judge's symbols sits an empty chair, a placeholder for the voice not yet born. Some interpret this as a seat for future generations, others as a nod to dissent within even divine courts. Either way, it's a reminder that justice isn't a monument, but a conversation stretching across millennia. The Babylonians knew what we often forget: laws carved in stone are only as righteous as those willing to read them aloud. The 21st prophecy doesn't shimmer like its celestial kin, it dwells in darkness. A single tablet, its surface pocked with age, speaks of a star that swallows light. A celestial anomaly the Babylonians called the Black Star. Unlike comets or planets, which they tracked meticulously, this entity defied their charts. Its arrival heralded not just change but obliteration. When the Black Star hangs low, the prophecy warns, kings will become dust and dust will hunger. The language isn't poetic, it's clinical, as if the scribe recorded an autopsy of the sky. Astronomers have scoured ancient records for matches, the most compelling candidate. The supernova that birthed the Crab Nebula in 1054 CE, visible even in daylight for weeks. Chinese and Arab astronomers documented it as a guest star, but the Babylonian tablet's description is eerily different. It notes the star didn't fade gently, it split its belly, a phrase modern astrophysics might interpret as the supernova's shockwave expanding. Even more chilling, the prophecy links its appearance to a devastating plague that ravaged Mesopotamia the following year, suggesting the ancients saw cosmic connections invisible to us. Yet the Black Star wasn't just a physical phenomenon. In Babylonian cosmology, stars were living entities, gods walking the night. A dark star represented Nergal, god of plague and the underworld, whose presence inverted natural order. The tablet describes its influence in visceral terms: crops withering from the roots up, rivers flowing backward in their beds, even the dead stirring in their clay houses. This wasn't mere superstition. Soil cores from this period show abrupt layers of sterility, evidence of catastrophic droughts possibly triggered by atmospheric changes post-supernova. The prophecies claim that the sky's breath grew thin, could reflect decades of cooler temperatures caused by stellar debris screening sunlight, a phenomenon modern climatologists call volcanic winter, but without the volcano. The tablet's true genius lies in its duality. Alongside celestial observations, it encodes political warnings. The star's shadow falls longest on the tallest throne. It notes a probable reference to rulers scapegoated for celestial disasters. Sure enough, court records from the period show at least 3 kings deposed amid famine riots, their statues defaced with charcoal to mimic the darkened sky. The prophecy weaponized astronomy, turning cosmic events into critiques of power. But the most haunting detail emerges in the margins. Infrared scans revealed erased calculations, early attempts to predict the black star's return. The scribes didn't just fear this anomaly, they hunted it. In their quest to master the heavens, they grappled with a terrifying truth: some stars don't guide. They devour, and in that realization, 4,000 years ago, the Babylonians touched a fear we've yet to outgrow, that the universe isn't just indifferent to us. Sometimes it takes notes. The 22nd prophecy doesn't just foretell a river's transformation, it paints the Euphrates in strokes of horror, describing waters that run thick as clotting blood, choking the reeds with the scent of iron. This tablet, unearthed near Babylon's docks, carries a visceral urgency absent in other omens. Its warnings feel less like distant visions and more like a scream trapped in clay. But was this a divine portent, or did the scribes record something far more tangible, an ecological catastrophe disguised as prophecy? Modern science offers chillingly plausible explanations. The first lies in nature's own palette. Harmful algal blooms, like those caused by cyanobacteria, can stain waterways crimson, releasing toxins lethal to fish and humans alike. Soil samples from ancient riverbanks near Babylon contain traces of these very organisms, preserved in sediment layers dating to periods of drought conditions ripe for algal explosions. Even more compelling, the prophecy specifies the river's stench, a hallmark of algal die-offs that release sulfurous compounds. Then there's the iron oxide theory. Mesopotamia's soil is rich in hematite, a mineral that tints earth and water rust red when disturbed. The tablet's mention of the blood rising after the earth shakes aligns with seismic activity stirring these deposits into the Euphrates. Archaeologists have found evidence of a major quake near Babylon around 1850 BCE, coinciding with accounts of red waters in merchant letters. But the supernatural interpretations refuse to be dismissed. The prophecy claims the phenomenon wasn't isolated, it was targeted. The river supposedly turned red only where it passed temples, sparing irrigation canals. Some tablets even describe the blood-red water climbing the steps of Esagila, as if seeking the gods themselves. This selectivity defies natural explanations unless priests engineered the spectacle using dyes or diverted polluted tributaries, a deception hinted at in a rival city's archives accusing Babylon of miracles woven from lies. The most haunting detail isn't the color, it's the aftermath. The tablet warns the river's transformation would herald 7 years of barren wombs and stillborn calves. Reproductive crises following toxic algal exposure are documented today, but to the Babylonians this was divine retribution. Their solution, a ritual where priests floated clay replicas of diseased livers down the river, symbolically transferring the curse back to the waters. Excavations near the old temple docks uncovered hundreds of these tiny terracotta organs, some still bearing cuneiform prayers. Yet the prophecy's true power lies in its duality. It served as both ecological record and political weapon. Later kings cited it to justify diverting the Euphrates, claiming they were purifying the blood, while rebels used it to frame droughts as royal failures. A letter from Mary's archives reveals how a governor facing dissent staged his own blood river using dye, then blamed it on his enemies' impiety. The prophecy became a mirror, reflecting whatever fear or ambition held it up. Today, as climate change intensifies algal blooms and mining runoff stains rivers worldwide, the 22nd tablet feels less like ancient mysticism and more like a stark warning. The Babylonians may not have understood microbiology, but they grasped this. When a river bleeds, it's never just water that's wounded. It's the bond between land and people, severed by either the god's wrath or human hands too reckless to tell the difference. The 23rd prophecy doesn't predict a king's death, it foretells something far more chilling: his erasure. a single tablet, its edges jagged as if broken in rage, warns of a ruler whose name would fade from the walls like rain from clay, his deeds scattered to the four winds without a whisper. This wasn't just poetic doom-mongering. It was a precise blueprint for damnatio memoriae, the Roman practice of memory condemnation centuries before Rome even existed. The Babylonians, it seems, understood a terrifying truth. In the battle for immortality, sometimes oblivion cuts deeper than any sword. Archaeology offers grim confirmation. Near the ruins of Babylon's processional way, excavators found a statue base with its inscription meticulously gouged away, the stone beneath scarred by repetitive chisel strikes. At first, scholars assumed it was vandalism, until they matched the damage to records of a usurper king, Shamash-Shum-Ukin, who rebelled against his brother Ashurbanipal in 652 BCE. After crushing the revolt, Ashurbanipal didn't just execute his sibling, he ordered every trace of his name obliterated. The prophecies claim that the scribes' hands will tremble as they unwrite, aligns with court diaries describing royal artisans forced to deface monuments they'd once carved with pride. But the prophecy's real genius lies in its psychological insight. It doesn't focus on the act of erasure, it dwells on the silence left behind. When the people no longer speak the name, it warns the gods forget to listen. This wasn't mere superstition. Babylonian belief held that uttering a name sustained the soul in the afterlife. To silence a name wasn't just punishment, it was cosmic murder. Modern excavations reveal the lengths taken to enforce this. Administrative tablets from the period show scribes systematically purging rebel names from tax rolls, prayer lists, even grocery receipts. The mundane became monstrous, a bureaucratic genocide of memory. The practice rippled beyond politics. Private letters from the era show families scrambling to rename children who shared the condemned ruler's name, terrified of association. One heartbreaking note from a merchant pleads with his wife to call our son by his second name now, lest the baker refuse him bread. Even nature wasn't spared. Astronomical diaries from Ashurbanipal's reign retroactively alter celestial events, attributing comets and eclipses to other years as if time itself had to be cleansed of the usurper's stain. Yet resistance flickered in the margins. The same prophecy that foretold the king's erasure also contains a cryptic loophole. The name lives where the stone does not. Archaeologists have since found clandestine memorials, tiny clay figurines buried in household shrines, bearing the forbidden name scratched in miniature. These weren't acts of rebellion so much as quiet defiance, proof that memory persists in whispers even when shouts are silenced. The most poignant was discovered in 2014, a child's practice tablet from a scribble school, its surface covered with clumsily repeated characters spelling the outlawed name. Somewhere, a teacher had risked everything to ensure the lost king wouldn't vanish entirely. What makes this prophecy so enduringly relevant isn't just its historical accuracy, it's the universal fear it taps into. From the Soviet Union airbrushing dissidents from photos to modern algorithms, shadow-banning voices, the hunger to control memory hasn't faded. The Babylonians simply wielded chisels instead of code. Their warning echoes across millennia. The most powerful tyrants aren't those who write history, but those who dare to unwrite it. And yet, as that child's tablet proves, even the sharpest chisel can't carve deep enough to reach every hidden heart. The 24th prophecy doesn't blaze across the sky like its celestial counterparts. It moves in silent, silver circles, pulsing with the rhythm of the moon god Sin's heartbeat. A tablet discovered in the ruins of Ur, its surface still shimmering with flecks of lapis lazuli, reveals a vision where the moon will wear darkness like a crown and the nights will forget their count. This wasn't just poetic mysticism. For the Babylonians, the moon was more than a celestial body. It was the sacred clock of the gods, a divine timekeeper whose phases dictated everything from harvests to royal coronations. To tamper with its cycles wasn't just heresy, it was an unraveling of cosmic order itself. the moon's earthly throne, stood as testament to this belief. Its great ziggurat wasn't merely a temple, it was a mirror. The structure's three terraces aligned with the moon's phases, waxing, full, and waning. Priests would climb these steps bearing offerings of silver metal sacred to Sin, their robes embroidered with crescent motifs that caught the moonlight like liquid mercury. The prophecies warning about the moon's crown of darkness finds eerie resonance in one of history's most meticulously recorded lunar eclipses, the total eclipse of 1651 BCE, when Ur's astronomers noted Sin's face was swallowed for the duration of 100 heartbeats. Temple records from that night describe panic in the streets, with priests scrambling to perform the mouth-washing ritual, a ceremony normally reserved for statues of gods, on the eclipsed moon itself, as if the heavens needed reactivating. But the prophecy's true brilliance lies in its fusion of astronomy and theology. The tablet doesn't just predict celestial events, it encodes them in sacred geometry. One passage describes the moon resting between the horns of the bull, a likely reference to the constellation Taurus. Modern astrophysicists have reconstructed ancient skies and found that during Ur's peak, the full moon did indeed appear to hover near Taurus's brightest stars during the autumn equinox, the exact moment when Sin's festivals reached their crescendo. This wasn't coincidence, it was celestial choreography. The priests of didn't merely observe the moon, they conversed with it, using its movements to structure their entire civilization. The practical applications were staggering. Babylonian lunar calendars, refined over centuries, could predict eclipses with uncanny accuracy by tracking the Saros cycle, a period of approximately 18 years between repeating eclipse patterns. The prophecies claim that the moon's secrets are written in 18 strokes, suggests the scribes knew this cycle long before Greek astronomers discovered it. Even more impressive, their lunar observations doubled as economic tools. Contracts from Earth specify interest rates that fluctuated with moon phases higher during dark nights when thieves supposedly prowled, lower under the full moon's protective glow. The moon wasn't just a god, it was the first actuarial table. Yet the darkest layer of this prophecy isn't in the sky, it's in the dirt. Excavations at Ur's royal cemetery uncovered something chilling. Mass graves dating to periods of prolonged eclipses, containing sacrificial victims buried with lunar insignia. The prophecy's mention of nights forgetting their count may refer to these crises when the moon's cycles grew erratic due to atmospheric dust from volcanic eruptions. Tree rings from this period show abrupt cooling, hinting at global climatic disruptions that could have dimmed the moon for months. In desperation, the priests might have turned to human offerings to rekindle Sin's light, a grim reminder that even the most advanced civilizations can fracture under cosmic uncertainty. What makes this prophecy endure isn't its predictive power, but its poetic truth. The moon still governs our lives not through gods, but through gravity's pull on tides, menstrual cycles, even sleep patterns. When the tablet warns that he who ignores the moon's whisper will drown in the tide's roar, it's not just forecasting celestial upheaval, it's acknowledging a universal human truth. We may have swapped clay tablets for smartphones, but we still dance to rhythms older than Babylon. The moon's secret wasn't just its phases, it was teaching us to measure time not in days, but in the space between darkness and light. The 25th prophecy doesn't just close the cycle, it shatters it. Unlike the other tablets, this one wasn't buried in temple archives or hidden beneath city gates. It was found in the hands of a skeleton, clutched to its chest in a collapsed scribble school near Babylon's ruins. The tablet's surface is scorched, its edges melted as if exposed to unbearable heat, yet its cuneiform remains hauntingly legible. It speaks of a day when the sky will tear like papyrus, when the gods will pack their shadows and leave, and finally when the clay will remember what the kings forgot. This isn't just an apocalypse, it's a reckoning written in the voice of the earth itself. What sets this prophecy apart is its duality. Babylonian cosmology viewed time as a wheel, not a line, a never-ending loop of creation and destruction. The tablet's language leans into this, describing the end as both finale and reset. The river will drink the city, it warns yet adds, but the reeds will whisper the old songs. This mirrors the Babylonian flood myths, where destruction clears the way for renewal, but there's a twist. Earlier tablets framed rebirth as divine mercy. Here, it's presented as inevitability, a force even the gods can't control. The prophecy's most jarring line claims the gods themselves will sleep in the dust, suggesting a cosmic fatigue deeper than any myth. Scholars are torn. Some argue the tablet predicts literal doom, a volcanic winter or asteroid strike, hinted at by its references to fire without flame and nights that outlast the sun. Ice cores from Greenland show a catastrophic climate event around 1620 BCE, when ash blotted out the sky for years. Babylonian records from this period mention the year of no dawn, lending credence to the theory. Others see it as political allegory. The phrase, "kings will choke on their own names," aligns with the fall of Babylon's last dynasty, when ruler Nabonidus's obsession with the moon god Sin alienated Marduk's priests, triggering civil unrest. Yet the most compelling interpretation isn't about fire or politics, it's about memory. The tablet insists that when the end comes, the clay will speak. Excavations at burned scribble schools reveal something extraordinary: kiln-like conditions that accidentally preserved tablets, hardening them against time. These weren't just records, they were time capsules meant to outlive their creators. The prophecy's closing lines, "What the hand writes in anger, the earth keeps in kindness," suggest the Babylonians knew their words might one day be all that remained. Modern parallels are unavoidable. When the tablet warns of the great silence after the storm, it echoes our own fears of climate collapse or nuclear winter. But its cyclical worldview offers a strange comfort. The Babylonians didn't see endings as failures. They were necessary pauses, like the space between heartbeats. Their prophecy doesn't close with a bang, but a whisper. Look for us where the water meets the wall, a clue perhaps to where they hid their greatest secrets. Or maybe just a reminder that even in ruin, something always remains waiting for the next cycle to begin. From crumbling empires to whispering statues, these 25 prophecies don't just predict the future, they dissect the very fabric of human nature. What emerges isn't a collection of mystic ramblings, but a mirror held up to civilization itself, reflecting our deepest fears, our blind hubris, and our stubborn hope. The Babylonians didn't merely foresee events, they mapped the recurring patterns of history, the rise of conquerors, the collapse of systems, the eerie way power corrupts and rivers turn against those who forget their power. Their tablets blur the line between fate and observation, leaving us to wonder, were these visions divine or simply the work of razor-sharp minds who understood that time moves in cycles? Consider how many prophecies hinge on human weakness: complacent rulers, fractured alliances, the slow rot of greed. The fall of Babylon wasn't just foretold through celestial omens, it was spelled out in the arrogance of kings who feasted while enemies crept through diverted rivers. The talking statue of Marduk, a masterclass in how authority manufactures its own legitimacy, blending stagecraft with sacred terror. Even the economic collapse prophecy reads like a modern textbook on inflation, proving that financial crises aren't modern inventions, they're human nature etched in cuneiform. Yet the real genius lies in the duality. For every doom-laden warning, there's a quiet counterpoint, a flood that brings renewal, a fallen city whose ruins teach humility, a shepherd's wisdom outlasting gilded thrones. The scribes didn't just traffic in despair, they encoded resilience. That broken tablet where a diviner doubts their own visions. It's a 4,000-year-old reminder that certainty is fragile and prophecy itself is an act of courage. So where does coincidence end and destiny begin? When Cyrus the Great marched into Babylon exactly as predicted, was it because the gods whispered to a scribe, or because the Babylonians recognized the inevitable rhythm of empires rising and falling? The tablets force us to confront uncomfortable questions. Do we shape fate, or does fate shape us? And why do these ancient warnings feel so urgently modern, as if the past is holding up a flare to guide us through our own unraveling? Now it's your turn. Which prophecy lingers in your thoughts? Is it the economic collapse that mirrors our own volatile markets, the shattered dynasty erased from history, or the river of blood that feels ripped from today's climate crises? Share your pick in the comments. Let's unravel these mysteries together, because the true power of these prophecies isn't in their predictions, but in the conversations they spark across millennia. The Babylonians may have written their visions in clay, but the endings, those are still ours.